The Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research PEAR project is one of the most intriguing studies ever conducted on the relationship between human consciousness and physical systems. At first glance, it might seem impossible that the human mind could influence machines, but PEAR researchers dedicated nearly 3 decades to testing whether thoughts alone could alter the behavior of electronic devices. Could our intentions really affect the world in ways science does not yet fully understand? The core of PEAR's experiments revolved around random event generators, REGs, electronic devices designed to produce completely unpredictable sequences of numbers, similar to flipping a coin thousands of times per second. In a controlled environment, participants were asked to mentally influence the REG's output, willing it to produce more ones or more zeros than would be expected by pure chance. Those results, over millions of trials, some data suggested small but statistically significant deviations, implying that human thought could have a subtle but measurable impact on electronic randomness. But how reliable were these findings? Could they be reproduced by independent research teams? The scientific community remains divided. Some researchers argue that these small deviations could be the result of experimental biases, statistical fluctuations, or even undetected environmental influences. Others suggest that while the effects are weak, they are consistent enough to merit further investigation. The challenge is the lack of a clear mechanism. How would the brain, a biological system, interact with an electronic machine at a distance? No known force explains such an interaction, making these results difficult to fit into conventional physics. PEAR's work did not end when the lab shut down in 2007. Some of its former members launched the Global Consciousness Project, which takes a similar approach but on a much larger scale. Instead of a single reg in a controlled setting, this project collects data from a network of regs worldwide. The goal is to see whether large-scale human events, such as global tragedies, celebrations, or moments of mass attention, correlate with changes in random. Surprisingly, some analyses suggest that the collective human mind may influence reg behavior during major world events. But is this truly evidence of consciousness affecting reality? Or could it be an illusion caused by selective data interpretation? Beyond PEAR, researchers in fields like quantum mechanics and neuroscience are exploring whether consciousness itself might have more influence on the physical world than we currently believe. Some experiments have hinted that observer effects, where the act of measurement alters a system, might apply in ways beyond just quantum mechanics. Could this be linked to what PEAR was investigating? If so, what are the implications for our understanding of reality? Skeptics argue that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. The idea that human thoughts can influence machines is as extraordinary as it gets, yet the effects measured by PEAR remain subtle and difficult to replicate. If the human mind does possess such abilities, why are they so weak and inconsistent? And if they are real, could they be enhanced with training, similar to how athletes or musicians refine their skills? The legacy of PEAR is not just in its data, but in the questions it leaves behind. If there is even a small chance that human intention can affect machines, what does this mean for technology, medicine, and the way we interact with the world? Could future research uncover a way to amplify these effects, or will they remain a scientific curiosity, a fascinating but ultimately unprovable anomaly? The mystery remains unsolved, and perhaps, like fire before it was understood, the science of consciousness is only waiting for the right conditions to fully reveal itself. The PEAR project hypothesized that human consciousness could exert a measurable influence on random physical systems, such as random number generators and mechanical devices. The underlying idea was that mental intention could bias statistical probabilities, leading to deviations from purely random outcomes. This hypothesis was aligned with broader discussions in quantum mechanics, where observer effects have been debated extensively. The project aimed to test whether conscious intent could statistically shift random processes beyond chance levels. Subjects were asked to mentally influence a randomly flipping coin generator to produce more heads than tails, with results compared against chance expectations. This concept is like attempting to will dice rolls to land on a specific number. Challenging conventional expectations of probability, the PEAR lab used electronic RNGs based on quantum-level fluctuations which theoretically generate truly random sequences. Participants were instructed to focus their mental intention on producing specific outcomes, such as more 1s than 0s in binary sequences. Extensive statistical analyses were performed over millions of trials, testing whether participants' focus correlated with deviations from pure randomness. The experimental design aimed to minimize bias, environmental influences, and procedural inconsistencies to ensure scientific rigor. A subject was given an RNG-based device and instructed to mentally push the results toward an excess of positive or negative outcomes. The study was like trying to influence the path of a river with sheer mental flow. The PEAR team reported small but statistically significant deviations from expected random distributions in some experiments. These effects were extremely small, often fractions of a % shift, but persisted across large data sets. The results suggested a potential consciousness effect, but skeptics argued that methodological issues, selective data analysis, and experimenter biases might have influenced findings. The main challenge was replicability, as similar studies by independent researchers yielded mixed results. In some experiments, subjects focusing on a specific outcome achieved a 0.1% shift from pure randomness, a deviation too small for real-world applications, but statistically intriguing. This is like flipping a coin 1,000,000 times and finding a tiny but consistent bias toward heads, hinting at an unexplained influence. Many mainstream scientists criticize the PEAR findings for lack of rigorous controls, potential subconscious biases, and data selection effects. One major concern was the file drawer problem, where only successful trials were published, while neutral or contradictory results were discarded. Further, independent replications of PEAR's work often failed to reproduce significant deviations from chance, leading to doubts about the reliability of the original claims. Some suggested that psychological or statistical artifacts, rather than actual mind-over-matter effects, explain the findings. Independent studies conducted at German and Dutch universities failed to replicate the same magnitude of effect observed in PEAR's RNG experiments. If a magician performs a trick successfully multiple times but fails when other people try it, the effect may be due to unseen influences rather than actual magic. The PEAR laboratory closed in 2007, but follow-up research continued under the Global Consciousness Project, GCP, and other consciousness-based studies. The GCP analyzed worldwide RNG data attempting to correlate deviations with major global events, such as terrorist attacks or mass meditations. Some studies suggested that collective emotional or mental focus could influence global RNG patterns, but results remained contentious. The challenge remains in distinguishing genuine consciousness effects from statistical noise. During 9/11, some researchers reported anomalous deviations in RNG outputs worldwide, which they attributed to global emotional shock. This is like suggesting that when enough people feel a strong emotion, the universe subtly bends statistical outcomes, a claim difficult to validate. Some theoretical physicists propose that quantum entanglement and observer effects might play a role in mind-matter interactions. If consciousness is somehow entangled with physical reality, small but measurable influences on probabilistic systems might occur. However, mainstream quantum mechanics does not support consciousness-driven physical changes, except in interpretational debates like the von Neumann-Wigner hypothesis. The scientific consensus is that no strong evidence links consciousness to direct physical alterations in quantum systems. Quantum physics allows for observer effects in the double-slit experiment, but no study has proven that human intent alone changes quantum randomness. This is like claiming that simply staring at a dice roll changes the outcome, a phenomenon that remains unproven in physics. Despite skepticism, research into brain-computer interfaces, BCI, neurofeedback, and intention-driven AI has gained traction. Companies are exploring whether brainwave patterns can influence digital systems, similar to how PEAR attempted to measure mind-RNG interactions. While such technology is based on measurable neural signals rather than supernatural influence, It echoes the PEAR concept that thoughts can impact external systems. This shift suggests that while PEAR's hypotheses remain unproven, related ideas are finding practical applications. Brainwave-controlled prosthetics allow users to move robotic limbs using EEG signals. The concept is like upgrading PEAR's experiments from willing an outcome into existence to actually measuring and using neural activity for real-world tasks. Several universities and research institutes attempted to replicate PEAR's work, but most failed to produce conclusive evidence of mind-matter interaction. Organizations such as the Institute of Noetic Sciences and various European research groups explored similar hypotheses with improved statistical methodologies. Despite some isolated findings, large-scale meta-analyses found no robust effects supporting consciousness-driven physical changes. This suggests that either the effect is too weak to be useful or does not exist in a replicable way. A large-scale meta-study of 380 RNG experiments found only minor deviations consistent with statistical noise rather than conscious intent effects. This is like conducting thousands of coin flips and only detecting patterns that could easily be random fluctuation. Today, research into consciousness and physical reality interaction has shifted toward AI-driven statistical analysis, neuroscience, and complex systems theory. Some scientists explore whether consciousness can be explained through emergent properties of neural networks rather than supernatural mind-over-matter influences. Others study how the brain processes probability and decision-making, which may explain the subtle biases PEAR reported. The future of such research likely lies in neuroscience and computational modeling rather than direct attempts to alter reality through thought. Modern AI-driven psychology experiments suggest cognitive biases influence how we perceive randomness, making it seem less random than it is. Instead of assuming thoughts change reality, the modern approach suggests that thoughts change how we interpret randomness.